Evet, sırada Japonya Kyoto Üniversitesi Kenan Rıfai Tasavvuf Araştırmaları Müdürü, Asya ve Afrika Saha Araştırmaları Enstitüsü öğretim üyesi Profesör Doktor Yasushi Tonaga'nın proje bilgilendirme konuşması yer alıyor. Sayın Tonaga'yı konuşmasını yapmak üzere sahneye davet ediyorum.
Günaydın. Diğer misafirlerimiz, ben burada böyle kıymetli bir şansı verdiğim için çok memnun oldum. Bir de ben her yaz buraya İstanbul'da bir ay kalıyorum ama bu defa sadece 10 gün falan burada kalıyorum. Biraz meşgulüm. Ama neyse bugün ben İngilizce konuşuyorum. Kusura bakmayın müsaadenizle. Çünkü başka iki arkadaşlarım var. Onlar İngilizce kullanarak tebrik yapacaklar. Bu nedenle ben de İngilizce konuşuyorum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your giving us such a precious chance. And today I'd like to talk about past, present, and future of Sufi studies in Japan. The subtitle is Three-Axis Framework of Sufism and Interdisciplinary Approach. So the contents are something like this. So it is divided into 4 parts. The first part deals with the past, the history of the Japanese studies on Sufism, Tariqa, and saint cults. The second part is about the present ongoing situation, about our joint research on Sufism, saint cult, and Tariqa. The third part deals with our future with Kenan Rifai Center for Sufi Studies, which was kindly founded by Kerim Foundation. And in the fourth chapter, I'd like to talk about my own proposal, Three-Axis Framework of Sufism. And this topic will continue to the panel 1 in the afternoon, and 2 other colleagues from Japan will discuss about it. So let's move on to the first part, survey studies on Sufism, Tariqa, and saint cult in Japan. Our center, Kenan Rifai Center for Sufi Studies, has just published such a catalog of Japanese studies. This one is the original one. It includes more than 1,000 books and articles inside. And the oldest article was written in Japan. The oldest article was written in 1910. And it includes the article from this oldest one to those which are published in 2016, this year. And based on this catalog, I'd like to tell something about the history of Japanese studies. Sorry, this is the catalog, and sorry. So about the transition according to disciplines, there are 3 study topics, Sufism, Tariqa, and saint cults, but in total, as you see, in 1910, our study on Sufism started. And then it was very few up to 60s, and then it increased a little bit. And in the first days, metaphysics are dominant all the time. And in the first days, literature was competing with it. But these days, this yellow one, anthropology, and this one, history, is increasing a lot. If we see the ratio like this, so from at the beginning, only the metaphysics, I mean Islamic studies, so-called Islamic studies, dealt with Sufi studies. And then in the first 40, 50 years, metaphysics and literature were competing with each other. Even nowadays, literature studies are existing, but the ratio is much decreasing. It takes only less than 10% at the moment. Instead, from 50s, history joined this study, and from 80s, anthropology joined Sufi studies in Japan. And then nowadays, the dominant one is the three disciplines are competing with each other. The first is metaphysics, Islamic studies, and then anthropology and history. And today, I myself am belonging to Islamic studies. And next two speakers from Japan are anthropologists. Unfortunately, this time we couldn't include historians in our group. And if we see, according to three study topics about Sufism, you can easily see that Islamic studies is dominant. Only almost 70–80% of researches are conducted by the students of Islamic studies. On the contrary, about tariqas and saint cult studies, the situation is totally different. Metaphysics has only a little percentage. And about tariqas, about pre-modern period, historians are conducting their research, while in the modern and contemporary period, anthropologists deal with the research. And about the saint cult studies also, the anthropology and history are competing, although anthropology is a little bit more active than history. About the ratio like this, so about Sufism, Islamic studies are dominant, and the tariqa, history and anthropology are competing. Sufi cult studies also, these two disciplines are competing with each other. So let's see the study topics one by one. First, about Sufism. As I told you, the Islamic studies, it is written metaphysics here. Islamic studies is dominant from the first up to present. Here, the graph seems decreasing, but because we are in 2016, that's why we are in the middle of 2010s. That's why this graph shows decreasing, but it is increasing. And so literature was almost 20%, and history and anthropology are about 10%. So about the ratio, as I mentioned, literature had a very important role in Japanese studies on Sufism because they concentrated on Persian mystical poems, for example, Hafiz, Sa'di, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, we haven't had many translations of the works of Rumi. That's why Jamal Nur-Hojam mentioned the name of Rumi to be translated, to the books of Rumi to be translated into Japanese. And that these days, literature is decreasing. And from the first to up to now, Islamic studies are dominant in Sufi studies. Second, about tariqa studies. As you see, history, this is history. History and anthropology are competing with each other. Although Islamic studies is much less than these two disciplines. The ratio is like this. So anthropology joined this study only as late as 90s, but it's now almost half of the tariqa studies. and almost all of the rest are conducted by historians. 3, Saint cult studies. In this field also, anthropology is dominant, and it's also competing with history. Ratio is like this. Up to the end of 70s, history almost monopolized Saint cult studies. But in the 80s, anthropology joined this study, and it has become dominant. And so here, you can see that the students of Islamic studies have concentrated on Sufi studies, not Tariqa studies or Saint cult studies. On the contrary, historians and anthropologists have concentrated only Tariqa studies and Saint cult studies, not on Sufi studies. So these disciplines are independent from each other, and they hadn't make an relationship with each other or collaborate with each other. This was the fact of the history of Japanese studies. Then I'd like to move on to the next section, present. I will talk about the ongoing project about Sufism, Saint cult, and Tariqa. And it was this joint group, This joint research group on Sufism, Saint cult, and Tariqa was founded in 1997. Professor Akahori, who will be the first speaker in the afternoon session, the panel 1, and I founded this joint research group. And as I mentioned, I myself am a student of Islamic studies, while Professor Akahori is an anthropologist, and we have many other members of historians. And so the first characteristics is the interdisciplinary approach based on not only Islamic studies, but also history and anthropology, and some other related disciplines. And also, trans-regional approach is one of our characteristics. For example, when we make a research of Sufism or Tariqa or Saint cult, we don't concentrate only in the Middle Eastern world, but also we are investigating our joint investigation in South Asia, Southeast Asia, China, Central Asia. And we haven't yet conducted the research, but we'd like to make another research in Sub-Saharan Africa, Sahara Africa. And so these are the two characteristics of our research group. So interdisciplinary approach is, I believe, does work very effectively when we conduct the researches on Sufism, Saint cult, and Tariqa. These are some publications of this joint research group. The left one was edited by Professor Akahori. This was the first issue which appeared from our joint research group. And then 2 others, and 2 more. These are some examples of our publications. And I myself have published several works on Sufism. The first one is about the school of Ibn Arabi, and the second one is Glossary of Sufism, Mustalahat al-Tasawwuf al-Islami, so Arabic and Japanese. And sometimes it also includes Turkish. And then this is Islamic Thought and Culture during the Ottoman period. It includes the original texts of Arabic, Persian, and Ottoman Turkish with the Japanese translation. So now let's move on to the future, our expected future, I will talk about our Canadified Center for Sufi Studies attached to Graduate School of Asian and African Area Studies, Kyoto University. And we have inaugurative ceremony of this Canadified Center for Sufi Studies in this March, and we welcomed the delegation from Turkey, including Cemal Nur Hocam, Emine Hanım, and the distinguished guests for us. And so it is a very brand new center. And then our aim, future activities, we have such prospectus. It is divided into 3 parts. The first is about researches. Of course, the research is the most important thing for the research institutes. We are planning to have annual international symposium. So this academic year, this is the first symposium in Istanbul. And then in the end of this academic year, Japanese academic year starts in April and ends in March. So it is different from Turkish style. And so we are now just in the midst of academic year. And in the end of this academic year, that is March, we will have the second meeting. So this is actually this academic year, we have 2 international symposium, not annual, but so-called biannual, 2 times a year. Anyway, we will have another symposium in in Kyoto. So I expect as many as people will join the tour to Kyoto to attend this international conference. The second one is publication of the special bulletins. And as I showed you this catalog, this is the first volume of this special bulletins. And we are planning to publish the second one of this series. It is named Kyoto Canadified Sufi Studies Series. And the second one will appear in March when you will visit Japan. And we're planning to accumulate as many books of Sufism, Tariqa, and Saint cults in Kyoto University. And our targets are, we like to concentrate on several topics. One is Sufism in Ottoman Empire, and another is the school of Ibn Arabi. And another focus is Sufism in Asia. For example, as I told you, Sufism in Southeast Asia, Sufism in China, Sufism in South Asia. Because there are many specialists of these fields in Japan. And also comparison between Sufism and Japanese tradition, including Buddhism and Shintoism. In the next panel, Professor Akahori will talk something about this Shintoism, Japanese original tradition. Today, originally, I was planning to talk about the comparison between Buddhism and Sufism. And I finished my preparation. And at that time, I imagined that I will be given 2 times to talk. I mean, for the general, the keynote speech or general greetings. And then I will be given my own presentation. At that time, I imagined by myself, no other information. But actually, I was given only 30 minutes for this chance. That's why I condensed the 2 parts into one. That's why if you'd like to listen to the comparison between Buddhism and Sufism, you can come to Kyoto in the next March. And at that time, I will show the comparison between Pure Land Buddhism and Sufism. Yok yok Kyoto'da yapacağım. Teşekkür ederim. Çok sağ ol. Teşekkür ederim. Şimdi doğrusu şimdi ben de bilgisayarımın içinde 오는 진짜 PowerPoint yok. Bu nedenle Kyoto'da yapacağım inşallah. Çok teşekkür ederim, sağ ol. Sağ ol, teşekkür ederim. So the next is fostering young researchers because our institute is attached to the graduate school. That's why we have many graduate students. So our one of the most important targets is to foster them. And we already have courses on the study of on the Islamic world, the study of Islamic thought, Sufism, Tariqa studies, Arabic, Persian, and Turkish. And this academic year, we started the study of Ottoman Sufism, and we are teaching Ottoman Turkish also. And in the next academic year, we will open Asian and African Sufi studies also. And for our students, very luckily, they will be invited to Istanbul here at Üsküdar University to attend a special course on Islamic civilization and Ottoman Turkish and so on and so forth. So we are very grateful to the Kerim Vakf's and Turkish government help aid for us. So the third one is international collaborations. We have 3 other sister institutes already. The first one is here, Institute of Sufi Studies at Üsküdar University. And second one is the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in the USA. And the third one is Canadified Chair at Peking University, China. So we are the 4th institute. So we'd like to make strong collaborations with these 3 elder sister institutes. Now, I'd like to move on the last part. This is about how do we consider Sufism. When I was a student, Sufism was translated into Islamic mysticism. Even nowadays, this translation word is often used, Islamic mysticism. But the specialists are wondering about this word, mysticism. For example, William Chittick wrote, those who work in the field of Sufism are well aware that the term mysticism is problematic. He also wrote, the mysticism is not the central concern of Sufism. And also, Sufi life and practice have nothing to do with mysticism. So these are the comments of William Chittick to the word mysticism. And also, our friend Carl Ernst also wrote like this, quote, mysticism carries the connotations of private and personal experience so that it fails to account for some of the corporate and political activities of Sufi groups, that is tariqas, unquote. So there are, it is not totally correct to translate Sufism as Islamic mysticism. So this is, nowadays it's a common sense among the researchers of Sufism. And then I will talk about the difficulties of defining Sufism. So if the definition of Islamic mysticism is not good, which other definition can be done? I want to say that the definition itself is very difficult. Why? There are 3 reasons. The first, the word Sufism is used both as a prescriptive and descriptive word. For example, one Sufi may say, Sufism should be so-and-so. So this is a prescriptive way of definition. But otherwise, when for example, I go to some field and see some practices, conducted under the name of Sufism, and I don't examine if it is truly Sufi or not, but this is the descriptive way. And so there are, in the books, we can find prescriptive expressions and descriptive expressions altogether, so they are intermingled. So it is very difficult to treat both of them at the same time. The second problem is where can we draw the demarcation line between Sufism and other practices? For example, sacred tree worship can be seen everywhere, or almost everywhere in the Islamic world. For example, I'm not sure this is a good example. In Eyüp Sultan in Istanbul, you can see the big tree just after entering the entrance. And it is the fact that not a few people are making dua in front of that tree. So, and the first time I came to Istanbul was 1987. At that time, more and more people were making dua in front of the tree. Nowadays, the number is decreasing. But still, some of the Turkish people, maybe, I think, are making dua in front of that so-called sacred tree. So this dua, is it related to Sufism or not? It's, sometimes they say yes, it is based on Sufism. Sometimes they say no, it's only on superstition, and so on. So the demarcation line is very difficult. The third one is a subtle relationship among Sufism, Tariqa, and saint cult. You may think that these three are overlapped with each other, and it's very easy. The relationship is very easy to explain. But the situation is not so. For example, you know the Qadiriyya Tariqa. Tariqa Qadiriyya, the eponym of Tariqa Qadiriyya is, as you know, Abdul Qadir Jilani. But there are a strong opinion among scholars that Abdul Qadir Jilani himself was not a Sufi. He didn't write any so-called mystical books. I mean, the books belonging to Sufism. Of course, there is a counter argument on this theory. Abdul Qadir Jilani should have belonged to Sufism. So these two opinions are competing at the moment. About saint cult, for example, when you visit Egypt, there is the mausoleum of Imam Shafi'i. Of course, you know that Imam Shafi'i was not a Sufi at all. But still, he was and has been and is venerated as Waliullah. So saint cult is not closely related, directly related to Sufism. So there are Sufi saints, but at the same time, there are non-Sufi saints in the Islamic world. So here I'd like to propose my own understanding of Sufism. My proposal is three-axis framework. So I quitted the idea to give the definition of Sufism. Instead, I'd like to draw such figures with three axes. I'm not sure X, Y, Z, the placement is okay or not. Maybe it's wrong. Anyway, it is not so important. I must admit that Sufism has the mystical axis, mystical element, mystical phase. This is a fact. But at the same time, maybe you can easily recognize that Sufism includes ethics, akhlaq. And at the same time, Sufism has the face of popular cult. So these three are I believe, the most important elements of Sufism. So Sufism itself is made of at least these three elements. So the advantage of this framework is if we take the variance in every axis, we can draw different figures from this one single framework. For example, these are symbolizing the Sufism in the classical period up to 11th, 12th century, I mean before the emergence of tariqas. This shows the middle period, I mean middle ages. So at that time, tariqas and saint cults were flourishing. And this shows the modern period. And in the classical period, Sufism was studied and conducted only by the elites, not by the common people. That's why it had ethical element, it had mystical element, but it didn't have popular element. And in the Middle Ages, it has three axes altogether. And in the modern period, as you know, so-called Salafists attacked Sufism very much. Almost the modernists also attacked Sufism. And so mystical fana was attacked very much. It is totally against the Sharia. And sometimes the ziyarat to Muslims are condemned as superstitions. That's why Sufism in the modern and the contemporary period don't emphasize mystical elements, don't emphasize popular elements, but they're emphasizing the ethical elements. So from only one single framework, we can see such different figures. So this is my proposal, and this proposal will be examined by the other two Japanese colleagues. Thank you very much.
Evet, Sayın Yasushi Tonaga'ya teşekkür ediyoruz ve kendisini plaket takdimi için sahnede biraz bekletiyoruz. Buyurun, sizi böyle alabilir miyiz lütfen? Hı hı. Ve plaketi vermek üzere Aile ve Sosyal Politikalar Bakanlığı İstanbul İl Müdürlüğü Müdür Yardımcısı Sayın Şemsettin Yalçın'ı davet ediyorum. Buyurun.